Afternoon all. I'll open us up with the karakia. Whakataka tiho ki te uru, whakataka tiho ki te tonga, ki a mākina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai, e he aka ana ti atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei maoriora.
Okay, so welcome, Anthony. What we might do, just so you also know who's around the table, because we have some staff members who are not always at the PT committee. So I'll start on my left with Brian, and then we'll just quickly work around the table and then along the side in terms of introductions and what organisation you represent.
Thanks, Chair. My name's Brian Sherritt. I'm the Manager, Transport Policy and Programs here at Waikato Regional Council. I'm the in-person representative of my Director, Phil King, who's online from Wellington at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Kia ora. My name is Jennifer Nicol. I'm a councillor representing Hamilton Kirikiriroa for the second term on Waikato Regional Council.
Kia ora, Angela Strange, also one of the councillors for Hamilton and Kirikiriroa, and the Deputy Chair of this committee as well.
Kia ora, I'm Angela O'Leary, Hamilton, what am I? Deputy Mayor of Hamilton City Council. Sorry, I forget because I'm transitioning out of that role already. And one of two Hamilton Hamilton City representatives here. My colleague Councillor Sarah Thompson will be along shortly. She sends her apologies for lateness. Nice to see you.
Kia ora everybody, Liz Stolberg, Deputy Mayor, Waipa District Council.
Yes, good morning. Roger Gordon, Waipa District Councillor, and I'm actually the better looking alternative for Liz.
Okay, after that self-promotion. We're just doing introductions. Your entry was very timely. Thanks, Carol. This comes up red when you've turned it on. Yeah.
Hi, afternoon, everybody. My name is Anthony Curl. I'm the shiny new accessibility coordinator for for CCS Waikato. And I've literally just been 2 or 3 weeks in the job, so this is all very new to me at the moment.
Okay. Thanks, Anthony.
Afternoon, Adrian Wilcock, Mayor of Matamata Piako. Thank you.
Quickly along the back.
Good morning, everybody. Nigel King, Team Leader of Transport Policy and Programs here at Waikato Regional Council.
Phil Hazelden, Transport Planner at Hamilton City and Chair of the Future Proof Transport Working Group.
Afternoon, everybody. Glenn Bunting, Transport Planner as well in the strategy area, Hamilton City Council.
Martin Parks, Hamilton City Council, Urban Transport Manager.
Kia ora, James Llewellyn, Public Transport Advisor with Waikato Regional Council.
Kia ora, I'm LJ, Executive Assistant to Director, Phil King. I'm Brooke Robeck and I'm your Democracy Advisor.
Now we've got some members online. Welcome, Sarah. We're just doing introductions. Okay. Now, those members online, both members and any alternates, if you can introduce yourselves, please.
Kia ora, Eugene Patterson, representing Waikato District Council.
Kia ora, David White, who's the second for Waikato District Council.
Okay. And any staff?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phil King. I'm the Director of Transport for the Waikato Regional Council.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm Bridget. I'm contracting public transport planner at Waikato Regional Council.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Catherine Simpson, Public Transport Planner at the Regional Council.
Kia ora, Vishal Ramdini, Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships Manager, Waikato District Council.
Robert.
James.
Oh,
James Winston, Governance Advisor, Hamilton City Council.
okay.
Thanks, James. Robert Brodnax, Independent Implementation Advisor for Futureproof.
Okay. We will get underway. Given it's a workshop, I'm happy for obviously alternates to sit around the table and to contribute. So it's quite separate from a formal meeting where alternates are not around the table, but given that it's a workshop, providing that opportunity. So you have had the reports pre-circulated, and Brian, are you kicking off or is Phil? Okay, Phil, over to you.
So welcome, everybody. It's great to have you here for the discussion today. Our plan is to take you through the work that Bridget and James have been leading, pulling together the information that we have compiled over the last several months for both the Hamilton bus network and the bus networks across the northern and eastern Waikato areas. We'd like to share with you our current thinking and get your feedback on the suggested adjustments to our existing networks that will start to move into our new contracts, which will commence at the timeframes that James and Bridget take you through. So we'll start with the Hamilton area and then we'll move into the North Waikato and get your feedback on both. Following that, if there is time, we'd like to have a conversation with you about the feedback that came in to the last meeting in February and then through the survey that we ran in March on the committee, and get your feedback on that to help us write a report that will come back through the next meeting of the subcommittee in August.
Okay,
Other than
Phil,
carry on.
There's two presentations regarding public transport. Is it the intent to take the committee through the first one and then have questions and discussion and then move into the second one?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Absolutely, just like that.
So therefore, if those around the table or online, if you can, we'll get the presentation, go through that and then have questions and discussion. And the reason I suggest that is that we have an hour, or we now have an hour 20 in terms of the three matters on the agenda. So if we are languishing somewhere, I may move you on just in terms of that time frame we have. Okay, we'll go to the Hamilton bus contract review.
Great, so this is me. Apologies, I'm not there in person. This is a slide pack, has 12 slides that you've received. So I'm going to take you through those to explain how we've got to where we are, why we've done it that way, and what we think will happen next. So can we have the next slide, please? I don't think I can control them. Okay, cool. So the purpose of this workshop and the work as a whole is to prepare for new bus contracts. And because they are 9-year contracts, a lot of work goes into them, firstly. And secondly, new contracts is the best opportunity to make any wholesale changes to the bus network so that we get as best a price as possible for any new changes without relying on variation rates from an existing contractor. And so that we can really align our forward thinking and strategy with what's on the ground and what's coming up. So Hamilton City's new contracts, as it says, they will run from 1 July 2028 to 2037. And so that's the end of those contracts is 12 years out from now. So we really have to think about what's happening in Hamilton in terms of growth, in terms of changes in land use, and transport networks. And so we have had a series of projects with Future Proof and workshops as well to bring that together to make our best guess of what we think contract options should look like. Next slide, please. So as I say, we've done bits of technical work and some workshops to bring that together. So the main piece of work is the Public Transport Pathways Report, which this committee will be familiar with. That work happened in the second half of 2024, and it was looking at the future-proof vision and how public transport in the metro area could align with that to support growth basically in the metro region, to provide people who live, work and play here with the most efficient ways to get around that we can. So we built on that with a Hamilton Network Review, which was a report that looked at how can we optimise existing services essentially within existing operational budgets. And that's something that the Regional Council, every bus public transport authority does from time to make sure that we're getting the best outcomes for people here within current operating budgets. So tweaks to routes rather than wholesale changes. So we had those two reports. One is a longer term vision for the future-proof region. The other was a Hamilton City review. There have been other reviews of networks in the region that James will talk about shortly. So we had those done basically by the end of last year. And then we needed to bring that together to say, well, what networks are we going to put into the contracts that bus operators are going to price? Because for an operator to price a bus contract when it's out to tender, they need to know very specifically where the routes are going to go, what the hours of operation of those bus routes are going to be, and what the frequencies are, so they know how many vehicles they need, and they can work out their timetables and staffing and everything else around it. So we had those two pieces of work to inform a series of workshops for the Hamilton bus network by itself. So it was Hamilton City staff and Waikato Regional Council staff, about 12 or 15 of us, across 3 workshops to take those and morph them into options that we think make sense for Hamilton over the next 12 years. And that can be then priced by the contractors. So I'll take you through in the next few slides what they look like. So the next slide, please. So when I say we have options, we propose to put into the contract documents for Hamilton routes for contractors to price 2 different options that we can then use to select what's going to be the best for the region and the city at the time. So we've said for 2028, from 1 July 2028, we're only going to have one option. And then by 2031, we might be in a position to do more. And that would be what we're calling the future-proof public transport pathways option. But we're also having the contractors price that base option all the way through the 9-year contract, so that if we decide that that's meeting our needs, if we decide we don't want to invest any more, or the prices come back quite different, we can choose which one matches the political and financial constraints and the ambition that we as a region have at the time. So yeah, that's what's informed this. We have the next slide, please. All of the premises for this work come from the Regional Public Transport Plan, which sets out quite ambitious aspirational service levels for public transport in Hamilton. We want to have ultimately rapid transit, and we've also been working with Hamilton City on identifying corridors for bus rapid transit in the future, and technical work to understand what that looks like on the street, what ground level infrastructure changes would be needed to enable that. And then the next layer down is frequent services, so equivalent to the Comet, the Meteor and the Orbiter that we have now, but ramping them up to 15 minutes in the peak and then 30 minutes off peak. And then we also have coverage services where we're saying that they're only a maximum of every 60 minutes. So this is quite an important slide because it represents quite a philosophical departure from what we have in Hamilton City now and in the region actually, where a lot of our services are kind of a mix of coverage and frequency. Some of our services will operate at the moment every 30 minutes in the peak hour, for example, and every hour outside of that. What we're saying with these options is that we're going to have very clear frequent services that are 15 minutes all day, every day, and they cover a lot of the city. Everything else is no more than 60-minute frequency. And essentially, that's the trade-off so that we can afford those frequent services and sell a really attractive, high-quality offering to move people through. And then that in itself justifies the work with the city to ensure or promote bus priority on some of those frequent corridors. So the difference from what we see in Hamilton now to what we're proposing is a more distinct separation between frequent and coverage services. Next slide, please. So this is the current Hamilton bus network. It's also, you might hear talk about unit structures. Hamilton is divided into 2 units at the moment, and they're contracted separately, even though at the moment they're run by the same operator. And there's a parallel conversation going on with staff around working out whether that's the best way to contract services in Hamilton, how many units we should have, whether it's 1 or 2 or something else. That's separate, but in any case, this is the starting network that we're going from. And this was particularly important for the Hamilton Network Review because, as I said, that work was intended to provide a more optimised, efficient bus network within current budgets. So the amount we're spending on this, how could we use that better? Next slide, please. So what we've come up with, as I say, this is what we'd like the contractors to price. For the contract year 2028, there's only going to be one option. We don't think there's time between now and 2028 to rapidly shift the network to something fundamentally different, to essentially change every single route and make some other changes as well. So 2028, we're suggesting the base option, which is this optimised one that I'll show you on a map shortly. And as I say, we're keeping that in the contracts as an option right through to 2037. If we decide that that is the one we're going to stick with for whatever reason, we can always increase the frequency of those services. We can extend them out to new growth areas. For example, Peacock and Rotakoti, we're suggesting that we have options to extend them as those areas become more populated. And then from 2031, we're presenting the PT Pathways option, which is better placed to accommodate the expected growth in employment and residents in the whole metro area. So that's an option if we're in a position to move towards it at that time. And through the workshops, we thought that it would be useful to have an option to have the flex on demand service, depending on how these services roll out. And if there are communities where more coverage would be useful or desirable or really needed by some communities, then we can provide a flex type service as that on demand to fill the gaps in coverage. But by no means do we think that should be widespread throughout Hamilton or anything. It's just there as an option if we want to balance this difference between frequency and coverage with another kind of corner to corner type service. Next slide, please. So the base option, as I say, it was based on the network review that Emma Cagney did of the current network, but we tweaked it quite a lot through workshops with Hamilton City for a few reasons. One of them was to make sure that as far as possible, this network and the future-proof one have the same corridors and bus stops if there's no reason to change them. So if they were close to one another, and they might as well line up, then we put them together so that when it comes to 2031, if we've just built a brand new bus stop somewhere for 2028, that we're not getting rid of it for no good reason. So that was the first reason that it was changed. And the second one was that the network review option was by design, it didn't look at detail in terms of where the buses actually went. So there were a lot of infrastructure and street level reasons that we made some tweaks to that for practical, operational, efficiency, so the buses can actually get where they need to go. So the main change between the current Hamilton network and this one is the bright blue line, which is the Rotatuna frequent service, colloquially known as the Rotatuna Rocket, which we would propose to bring in sometime within the current NLTP to get ready for this change. And to do that within current budgets, obviously we would need to consolidate rationalise existing services to do that. So change some of the services, particularly in the northeast. So yeah, that's the base option, which, as I say, we're proposing to include in the contracts for every year from 2028 onwards. Next slide, please. So the PT Pathways option has, the main difference from this one is that the orbiter is replaced with 2 different services, and there are bus efficiency reasons for doing that it's not a continuous loop, that it's an out and back service on both sides of the city. So the Northern Link and the Southern Link, even though they're kind of east and west. The Comet, Meteor and Rocket remain. In some cases, they're slightly different than what they are now. And you can see on that map, for example, the dotted lines going to the south into Peacock and an option down to the airport, for example, so that we can have these options priced in the contracts and then roll them out when it makes sense, so that we have buses in places where people are moving into, but equally we don't have a bus every 15 minutes around empty streets either. So we're building in flexibility for future governance to make those calls between provision and, affordability and other constraints. Next slide, please. Yeah, and as I say, we're including flex as an option to potentially come and go based on communities' needs at the time. We want this, though, we had a lot of conversation in these workshops about this being about the future of transport in Hamilton and every mode, and we want to promote walking, cycling in an accessible city, people using total mobility to get to buses as well, so that the premium frequent services are the spines of the city, and once people get to those, then they're away and they can get where they're going efficiently. So building up that first and last mile connections with walking, cycling and accessible transport are the first option, and then flex as definitely as a backup if we think that it's useful investment. Next slide, please. So that's it. It's quite a simple model, really. You've just got 2 options for the contractors to price plus the flex. We would welcome, obviously, feedback through this workshop. This report, Martin Parks is presenting a report to Hamilton City Transport and Infrastructure Committee next week. We want to then refine these proposals based on your feedback. And then over the next 6 months or so, we have to undertake public consultation in some form and assess their feedback as well. So none of this is set in stone, but we're quite confident that the process we've been through with the different stakeholders and technical specialists has landed us in a pretty good and useful place. So I think that's it, really. I think the next slide is just the end. So yeah. We welcome your questions, and there are several people in the room as well who have been at these workshops. So if it's easier for them to answer, then they're welcome.
Okay, thank you. So I'll open it up for questions or comments. What I wasn't envisaging happening, though, is having a debate on particular matters that a member may put on the table, because we'll be here for the rest of the afternoon. So it's the opportunity for that thinking go on the table for the team to go away and then work through. And I've got Angela and Adrian first out of the blocks.
Cool. Yeah, we're first for once. Thank you, Bridget, for your work on this. Yeah, and appreciate that staff have had, 3 workshops, did you say? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just had a question around, we do hear a lot from very loud voices about bus sizes. Just wondering how that fits in with your thinking here. Would there be any changes to bus sizes at any stage through this? And then I've got a couple more.
I mean, ideally the bus is sized to meet the demand and the desire of the route. The main change that I should have mentioned that James will touch on too is that we have the zero emission bus mandate coming. So they'll probably be electric buses. Whether they are what we call a large bus or a double decker depends on the demand as it does now. We tend to prioritise double deckers for the routes and times that need them. So we didn't spend a lot of time talking about that specifically. But it's something that can be changed much easier than the routes themselves or, the other stuff.
Okay. Yep. I was thinking maybe instead of going bigger, that you might look at smaller buses for those more coverage routes, but I'll leave that there. And then on the flex, I do recall sometime within my past 5.5 years, already consulting with the northeast of Hamilton over using flex. Yeah, and people were very excited when I talked to them, and then that idea sort of died and hasn't ever come into being. So it's great to see it here, but it's a little hard to get excited about it when, we've already consulted and talked about it, but nothing's happened.
Yep.
But on a positive, that rototuna frequent, so would that be every 15 minutes?
Yep.
Rather than a rapid every 10?
Well, the difference between frequent and rapid depends on the timing in the future and therefore how much we can afford at that time. So it would start frequent and hopefully go rapid eventually. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's the same with flex in that we just need to balance the strategy and our ambition and aspiration with what we can afford, including our subsidy from NZTA, therefore the GPS. So that's why we aligned these kind of time points in the contract with NLTP cycles so that we can work towards what we're confident of being able to deliver at those times.
Yeah, I like your thinking with that, being ready for when things do change. Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
And not over-promising. Yeah, that was important to us.
Yeah, I think that's been a bit of a mistake in the past, and you kind of feel a bit burnt. I know I do. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. Adrian.
Oh, thanks. Just a couple of things from me, just around Ministry of Education and the Health Board, because the buses kind of, I presume the other agencies, there's a little bit of communication there around what it might mean for schools. And just noting at the moment, as a person from Matamata at a health forum recently in Morrinsville, where the car parking at Waikato Hospital is diabolical at the moment and people are missing their clinical appointments because they're trying to find a car park. So the need for perhaps a park and ride needs to be publicised. But I'm not here to debate it, just throwing those things in there that in our planning for these sorts of things is to consider what those external factors might be that affect the service or that might be an opportunity. Thank you.
I'll just note that the public transport planners at the staff have regular meetings with the hospital staff. There are people from, for a number of different reasons, one from facilities management, integration with buses, but also emergency presentations and road safety. So for a lot of different, and community transport, obviously. So for a lot of different reasons, we are meeting with them. They've got a travel plan that they've been developing over the last few years, and it's always in need of changing and tweaking. So yeah, rest assured that we're working with them. We know each other. Ministry of Education, there's potential changes afoot there. We're engaging with them also. And when it comes to schools, we've got Hamilton's School Link, Hopes and Dreams, for example, along Peach Grove, Hukanui roads, and we're making sure that we've got frequent services running along there, for example. So all of those things were important in our decision making, both what is happening now and our best guess about what might happen in the future, and making those trade-offs.
It's great. Thank you for that assurance. I guess it extends into universities and tech as well, but
for sure.
That covered. That's great. Thanks, Bridget.
Jennifer, then Angela O.
Thank you, and thank you, Bridget. Certainly, having paid attention to this over the last couple of years, I can see where we're going, and I do think it's an improvement. And it is so hard to plan when you don't know what match funding you're going to get or not get. Just a comment that I think we've still got this issue of elected members not being across this well enough across the councils, and I worry that at some point there'll be decisions where they'll be pretty hard to get through, perhaps just because people don't feel like they've been taken on the journey enough. I know that we here have to a degree, but even, for example, while we are certainly not experts like you guys are, and we shouldn't have too many opinions on why this or that line is there, I think that it would be worth putting in the time to create for that, just so that people are exposed to it enough to not feel like they suddenly know better at the end of the process. But yeah, other than that, it's a really great start. And I'm just really keen also to see how we might be thinking holistically in the long run when a few other bits and pieces of work come together. For example, with our ramping up of community transport, with hopefully some type of joint venture opportunities, how all of that fits in with this to get the user experience to be the kind that I think we're going for, which is to get a lot of people using shared transport. Yeah. So this is one piece. Just both of those comments, just the taking on the journey and the seeing the holistic picture, which might include park and rides and stuff as well. Just to make sure that we have a smooth path going forward. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
The only comment I'd add to that is that I think what's helpful and opportunity for us is the PT rating work that has been going on, and us staff visiting councils and engaging with elected members and staff at all of our councils on that. And then the opportunity that having a more cohesive funding arrangement for public transport means not just for what we deliver, but how we engage with those councils on that. So I think we're in a pretty good place at the moment. And certainly with Hamilton City and the work we've done, I'd say the relationship and the feedback loops are really strong and healthy at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. So it'd be good to just keep the momentum on that, especially heading into the new triennium, to make sure the advice is there for all the right committees to be formed.
Yes,
but obviously
for sure.
we've got a piece later there on that. Thank you.
Angela Rowe.
Thank you, Bill W. I just want to follow on a little bit, Bridget, of my counterpart Angela's point or question around the size of vehicles. It doesn't say in the documentation for the workshop that we would have any influence. It talks about the contract being timetables, hours of operation, etc. So how much, if any, influence will WRC have working towards the contract with vehicle choice?
Beyond the requirements for urban buses, I don't know, but I might defer to maybe James or Phil might have more insight into that.
James.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The answer to your question is we can specify whatever size and shape of vehicles in the contract that we like. And it all really depends on the fitness for purpose for the number of people who want to use the vehicles, and in particular, the peak vehicle requirement. So the reason a lot of the vehicles are very large is because they have to cope with school runs in the morning. So if you have a large vehicle, that means you can have one driver, one service to take children to school. If you have smaller buses, you may need 2 or 3 buses and drivers to cover the same number of pupils. So that's generally why buses are the size they are, because there's often a school requirement. But we can be totally flexible as long as we are confident that we can meet the demand. The bus can be specified in the contract in whatever shape or size. It'll probably be Chinese. That's the only thing you'll be if it's a zero emission bus, but they're very good.
And the only hard and fast requirement at this stage for the new contract is that new buses coming on have to be EV, don't they?
That's correct. So from 1st of July, any new bus on an urban contract is required to be zero emission, which in reality means battery electric.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Now I've got David White online. David.
Thank you. I was pleased to see that the Comet has been considered to go up to Te Awa Lakes when that development goes ahead. I'm struck by how when that if and when that development goes ahead, it's almost a seamless transition from Hamilton City through to Ngātawahoa from a end user's perspective. So I was wondering if the Comet had been considered to be pushed up to Ngātawahoa and the cost benefit behind that.
No, it hadn't, mostly because we were considering services within Hamilton City and none of them go beyond the boundary at this point. It doesn't mean we couldn't do that though, for sure, if it made sense to do that, especially if we were tying in to connect with a northern service, which James will talk more about. But like you say, they're getting pretty close. So there's no philosophical reason we couldn't do that. There might be some technical or policy ones that would make it less straightforward.
That's great. I'm pleased to hear that and looking forward to that conversation. And I would reiterate, I can't remember who said this earlier, we need to make sure that the ideas behind it are communicated out to the other councils, for example, in my case, Waikato District Council, but, with a new election coming up, and make sure that we keep people all on the same page.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
No other questions or comments on this matter? There's nothing online. Okay, thanks very much, Bridget, for that. And we will now move to the regional connections plans. And James, I presume you're going to take us through the presentation on that.
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Can I have the next slide, please? So the scope of these public transport service plans is firstly to optimise the services that we currently have and get them to try and perform as best they possibly can, broadly within existing budgets, but also looking at future growth opportunities. And to do that, what we've done is looked at the operational and customer performance of these routes. At the moment, we're not proposing to examine in detail the changes to vehicles or infrastructure, but that will happen as part of the next contracts. But this piece of work that we've just concluded is just looking at the services and the demand. And then, as I said earlier, we'll work out what size or shape of bus will best fit that demand profile. So 4 routes have been looked at. 3 of those I'll talk about in detail. Thames Connector is part of Hauraki and Thames Coromandel. So strictly speaking, not part of Future Proof, but for completeness reasons, I've included it in this presentation. Next slide, please. So just a few figures on the current passenger demand. So you'll see that Northern Connector, which is our most frequent regional service, has the highest level of passenger demand in total per annum. But Raglan, which is another regional route, also actually performs pretty well, considering it's actually a much less frequent service than the Northern Connector. The 44 Pocono to Pukekohe, the numbers are quite low. The reason for that is that the lack of train services from Pukekohe into Auckland as a result of the electrification scheme has, in our view, depressed the demand for that quite a lot. Now we're looking at with interest at the demand profiles as a result of the station reopening. So we would hope to see some improvement, but it's too early to tell for certain. What that shows on the right-hand side of that table is the efficiency through operating costs per passenger, revenue per passenger, and therefore subsidy per passenger. So Northern Connector and Raglan perform pretty well. Those figures are actually comparable with many urban services that you would see across New Zealand. The other services have generally much higher subsidy per passenger, but none of them are in the basket case category. I've seen numbers like $40 or $50 per passenger, and none of them are that bad. So what this table says is there's actually quite a lot of potential for us to do better, but also we don't have services that are certainly in the basket case category. There are good services we can actually improve on. Next slide, please. So what we've done through these public transport service plans is look at 3 scenarios or phases. So short term, what can we implement at the start of the next contract? either at zero cost or with a nominal increase, which I've defined as being less than $50,000 per year. Now, zero cost requires a huge caveat, which we'll see in red. So there is really no such thing as zero cost in the new contract, because the chances are the prices from tenderers will be higher than the current contract, and that isn't without the premium associated with introducing electric buses, which at the moment is around 20% higher than diesel. So zero cost is a nice aspiration. In reality, there will be increasing costs almost certainly, even if we keep service levels broadly the same. So that is something to bear in mind. But of course, until we actually see a tender price, we don't actually know. So we'll use zero cost, but just be aware that actually in reality, we will be looking at some cost contract inflation. Medium term, we could implement some improvements at the start of the next contract if there is funding available, and very critically, if there is the desire amongst the communities for improved services. You know, we don't want to increase service levels without reasonable expectation that people will actually use them. So we're very keen to test our thinking around both the medium term and indeed the longer term improvements, which, with the best will in the world, with budgets where they are, if long-term proposals are going to come in, they may take place some point during the next contract rather than at the start of it. Every contract runs generally for 9 years, so there is an opportunity to introduce changes, say in year 4 or 5, if funding becomes available at that time. So the phasing is really just to be able to give us a range of options we can look at, and it's important that those options are clearly defined and costed, and I'll come on to that on the next slide, please. So I'll start with North Waikato. So each table shows short, medium and a long term. The current 2024-25 contract cost is about 2.3 million. And in the short term, if we were to keep to broadly that level of expenditure, so I've put in a range of 2.5 to 2.9, effectively you would keep the frequencies of the existing 21 and 44 services pretty much as they are. You can withdraw the Huntly and Pukekohe service on Route 21 and effectively replace it with an additional morning Huntly to Te Kaupiti return journey. And within current budgets, that's pretty much all you could expect to do. So the medium term and longer term effectively look at increases to frequencies both for Route 21 and Route 44. So for 21, we're particularly looking at the Huntly to Te Kaupiti section, which at the moment is relatively underserved compared to Huntly, Ngaruawahia and Hamilton. For the 44, increasing the frequency potentially to every 30 minutes peak and 60 minutes off peak. Peak and off peak at the moment we're defining broadly as being morning and afternoon. So say 6:30 to 9 in the morning, 4 till 6:30 or 7 in the afternoon. But those are flexible. One thing that we're interested to test is whether there's demand for a new express weekday peak hour service from Pokeno direct to Drury via State Highway 1. That would connect into the new station at Drury, and also Drury is quite a big area for, or future area for employment. So that may be something we can do in the medium term. In the longer term, essentially both routes you would increase frequencies even more. So for the 21, we'd be looking at Huntly to Te Kaupiti for every 60 minutes. For 21 south from Huntly to Hamilton, that could increase to every 20 minutes peak, 60 minutes off peak. And the question about the Comet, one option would be to extend some Comet services from Hamilton up to as far as Huntly potentially. But we haven't gone into that level of detail yet. That's something to be looked at. And if we wanted to increase that express weekday frequency service that I talked about from Pokeno to Drury, we could add in an extra 4 additional inter-peak return journeys, which would give you a service roughly every sort of 2 hours, hour and a half, something like that. What you'll notice is how the costs increase. So short term, 2.5 to 2.9 million per annum is the banding for in 2027 prices, roughly. Medium term, that ramps up from 3.4 to 4.2, and long term, significant increase, 7.8 to 9.4. So you can see that frequency is requiring a lot more resource to be put into the process. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question on that one? Or do we go to the end?
No, we'll
Cool.
come back. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep. Won't take long. Eastern Connector. Sorry, could you just go back to Eastern Connector, please? Thank you. So again, we've got short, medium, and long term. So the short term, the main change would be to withdraw the Paeroa to Te Aroha service and effectively extend the routes from the centre to the north of Te Aroha and retain the existing frequency of the service both from Te Aroha and Matamata to Hamilton. That Paeroa service I'll talk about in a minute, but essentially it's about the desire of Hauraki to see services reallocated or budgets reallocated to connections towards Thames. So there is an implication for what we do with the Paeroa to Te Aroha section. Medium term, the basic premise here is to increase the services from Morrinsville to Hamilton, potentially every 30 minutes peak and hourly off peak. What that would allow us to do is for every other service which effectively would terminate at Morrinsville, we could actually then use that service to provide some coverage within the town itself, to have a little town route, runs around and picks people up and deposits them back in the town centre. And Morrinsville, 9,000 people, it could probably 10. There you go. Well, it can definitely then sustain something like that. So that's even better. And by 2027, it will be, who knows? So yeah, the town route is, we think, a good idea. Also increasing service coverage again in Te Aroha. There's some opportunities there. Longer term, we're looking at, again, increasing the frequency from both Te Aroha and Matamata to Hamilton. So every 60 minutes peak, 120 minutes off peak. And we could also introduce a dedicated town service for both Morrinsville and Matamata. So that would be a separate vehicle. So it wouldn't be the vehicle that used the Hamilton to Morrinsville section. There would be a separate vehicle that could provide a much more frequent service. And again, as you'll see, the costs increase quite significantly depending on your option. Everything from 1 to 1.2 for the short term, 1.8 to 2.2 for medium, and right up to 4.6 to 5.4 for long. So quite a significant ramp up in costs. Next slide, please. Raglan, pretty simple. In the short term, there isn't much we can really do with the existing service other than keep it going because it's pretty much maxed out in terms of resources. Longer term, or sorry, medium term, we can introduce an additional Whotawhata to Raglan and also a Raglan to Hamilton service, and also look at a Raglan town service, which will be again a dedicated bus, probably running every 120 minutes or 2 hours to be discussed. Longer term, that would be to build on that medium term scenario and increase the Raglan Hamilton service to every 2 hours. It could be more frequent, but that would also increase the cost as well. So we've kept it at that for now. The existing contract cost is 0.6, and the options, everything from 0.8 to 1.0 through to 2.0 to 2.6. Next slide, please. And just for completeness, this is Thames Coromandel and Hauraki. So as I mentioned earlier, Hauraki in particular are keen to see more services towards Thames. So effectively the short term would be to change some Thames connector services to be extended into parts of Hauraki. But medium and longer term, effectively you'd need new dedicated routes between the various townships in either Hauraki or Thames Coromandel into Thames. And the medium term, you could have a once a week service using one bus that starts in a different town every day and provides a once a week service, 1 to 5 as you see on the screen there. Or if you're really ambitious, then you have a bus for each town, and that can provide a daily service, perhaps 2 to 3 services a day, but for a much bigger increase in cost. And all of these things, as I mentioned, can be done, but the key is to understand and meet the level of demand both now and also in the future. It's really, really critical that we get more bums on seats for any investment we do make. I think that is the last slide. Let me just check. And if that is the case, then I will happily take questions.
Okay, Jennifer and then Adrian.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to when we have boxes after the long term of our other ambitions, once that public transport gets valued to the point where we're not just putting the externalities on individuals all the time. But my question was, the Route 21, for example, because it talks a lot about changes from the Te Kōwhata service to Hamilton. I just wondered whether the I suppose the Huntly South section of that has higher patronage than the Te Kōwhata part, and whether rather than extending the entire frequency to Te Kōwhata, which will add quite a bit of cost, you'd looked at increasing the frequency for Huntly to Hamilton section, but leaving the Te Kōwhata piece for less frequent, I suppose. Whether you see any value in that, or whether those are all part of the discussions you've already had.
I mean, that's pretty much what we're proposing.
Right.
So under the longer term option, I think we're saying, let me just check again.
Yeah, increase frequency Huntly to Te Kōwhata every 60 minutes.
Every 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Hamilton to Huntly every 20 minutes peak, 60 minutes off peak. So yeah, I mean, these are all very good debates to have. We do believe there is quite a lot of potential between Huntly, Ahinawa, Sleepyhead, and Te Kōwhata. But ultimately, we'll test all of this through further engagement with the councils and with the public. And it'll be interesting to get their views, because it will be, it's their services. We need people to use them. And so if they're saying they want something different from what we've proposed, we need to listen to that very carefully.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Adrian.
Thanks, Phil. Phil will be listening and be expecting me to say what I'll say. Just with, it looks really good. And obviously it's all going to be about demand, right? And frequency does help build demand. I get that, because it's, it gives you options. What is, just picking up on this number of stops around town, because I know I've talked to Phil about this, Matamata's got quite a few stops, and that takes a bit of time getting around town to then get on your journey. What's the acceptable walking distance to go catch a bus? Is there a prescribed distance?
Well, through the chair, there are distances which are often quoted in the literature, which generally is no more than a 400-metre walk. But of course, that really does depend on the capability and the mobility of the person. So that might be great for a fit young man like me, but there are people in our community who would struggle to walk that distance. Back to Bridget's point earlier about what we do in those situations. If we find that for very good reasons of efficiency, we want to get routes fast and frequent on the main routes, but that means perhaps less coverage on some of those other routes, what do we do? So 400 metres is your guide, but it's definitely not something we rigidly say that must be, and no more or no less. It all depends on the context, how many elderly or mobility impaired people there are in an area, how many rest homes you might be serving. And clearly, the more people who we think have mobility challenges, then the less acceptable it is for that distance to be high.
So I'll go back to the philosophy of when our council agreed to having this bus service, and especially extended to Matamata, was to access services that weren't available in our community, and there was a focus on education, the tertiary education. Given the other services, that's just one point that I'd just highlight there. And the other one, which as I mentioned before, is just with Matamata to Cambridge. That if you want to a quicker service that makes sense, that we're going the long way round. Just to highlight that. And I was very interested in the Thames Coromandel, the philosophy of buses going around the peninsula. There's a significant number of ratepayers in that area that actually are seasonal. And like when you're going to charge ratepayers for a bus service that they're likely to use because they don't live there, very interesting to understand the economics of that and the demand, because of the population swells so significantly over the summer months. But what does that mean for the people that live in those small communities? There's it's cost versus convenience, right?
That's exactly it. That's the dilemma we always have.
Yep.
And yeah, like I said before, what we're really interested in is getting as many people on buses and as many people paying what is a fair and reasonable amount to use those buses, so that the burden on the ratepayer is minimised as far as possible. It's always the dilemma we have. The current government, I think rightly, are saying that there needs to be a bit of a rebalance between the bus passenger and the general taxpayer or the road user. But that would happen anyway. You know, we want more people paying a fare that they're able and willing to pay.
It's the old cart and the horse. You can never win that one, or the chicken and the egg. Great, thank you.
Now I've got Liz, Angela S, Eugene and David in that order. Liz.
Thank you. Look, I appreciate that a lot of our contracts for Waipa were renewed last year, I should say, with our fleet moving to electric. We got some double-decker buses, which was brilliant, but a significant increase of services. So I'm not surprised to see that, you know, we're not going to probably get anything new in terms of those regular services. But of course, our patronage has continued to increase every quarter, and we see those results, you know, every time in these reports. But I did want to highlight that our district does continue to grow. Significant subdivisions are still proceeding, strong interest in our industrial area, particularly in Hautapu. So in short, demand is still, you know, increasing exponentially. We also have congestion, in particular in Cambridge. Doesn't help we have a river that separates, of course, the town. But over peak times, you know, there is a continued sort of frustration around that. And we also host a number of significant events, you know, based out at Karapiro, but through schools and Kiki and Te Amutu too. So this also adds to the congestion. So in discussion, I suppose, with elected members and staff, we still see a flex service as being, it's a real opportunity. I think the potential is still there. So I think you have a meeting coming up with staff, Waipa staff, in the next week or two. And I'd really like to see sort of more detailed discussions around a potential flex service for Waipa. So I guess in short, really just continue to plan for what I see as a growing district, being ahead of the demand in a way, but knowing that that demand is going to come.
Yeah, through the chair, I totally agree. If there are any opportunities within the current contract to meet that demand, we should be looking at them quite seriously. So I think the first stage, as you say, is to have discussions at officer level to understand what the opportunities might be. I understand there may be some more work coming on Cambridge Connections and that longer term strategy and working out how that's all going to fit together. I think the development one is really interesting because in the UK where I come from, there is a lot more opportunities to fund bus services from developers. It's something that just doesn't really happen much here in New Zealand, if at all. And with the government moving towards development levies, there is potentially an opportunity to look at that as another source of funding. All these things can be looked at. The important thing is we keep the conversation going, we keep monitoring that demand, we keep understanding how we can optimise what we've got, but be ready to increase services as and when we need to. So happy to work with your staff on all of that.
Angela S.
Yeah, I just listened with interest to the previous speakers, but yeah, I agree with Mayor Adrian around looking at Matamata to Cambridge and then tying in with those Cambridge frequent routes as well. I just had a question around the Hauraki Thames Coromandel things that we've seen here. When will elected members from those areas, what are the plans to engage with them? Would that be through RTC or?
Yeah, through the chair, it will be through RTC, but we've already had some discussions with both the officers and through the officers, His Worship, the Mayor. So feedback from Hauraki actually came from the Mayor himself. And broadly speaking, the district are supportive, but understandably want to know more detail. But all of this effectively through RTC and through then the public consultation will be working with all of the districts to, craft a series of options, something along the lines I presented there, but it doesn't have to be exactly that, to give the communities clear views on what could happen, how much that might cost, and what kind of patronage levels we'd kind of need to see to make it actually happen. So yeah, the ongoing discussions with all of the districts is key to all of this, not least of which because as the previous speaker mentioned, the development side of things is critical to all of this, and planning that future development and making sure bus services actually serve it from the start rather than 3 or 6 years later. So yeah, there's a lot more to go. I guess what we're looking today is broad comfort that these proposals are roughly on the right lines, but happy to have more discussions about the details as we get into it.
Yeah, I just would like to see probably our Waikato Regional Council laws, the constituent ones, involved in those areas, briefed as well.
Yeah.
And just, kept up to date as well, because I think that's really important for buy-in and when decisions come back to our table as well. Yeah, just from Liz's points as well. Agree with her pushing for flex within each town. And I don't know if it's something that she's seen feedback on but connecting Te Awamutu to Cambridge as well. Could be something I'm sure you're across that. But and then just lastly, Pocono up to Drury at peak times along the motorway. It's intriguing.
Yeah,
what
I said.
I'll wait for more detail maybe a little bit later on.
That one I think is one we looked at and we thought, do we include it or not? But I think it is worth it because it's something a bit different, and it shows that we're looking at different options. Whether it's a good idea compared to other uses of the money, I think we'll need to discuss. The key challenge I think we have along the motorway is congestion. There isn't much point in providing a bus service if it gets stuck in the same amount of traffic as everyone else moving into South Auckland. So that might be a bit of an issue we need to work through, particularly with NZTA.
Okay. Because I suppose the other option is to do what it currently does and take everyone to Puki to jump on the train.
I mean that will be there as well. So you'll have two options essentially from Pocono. So either to go up to Puki through Turkau or straight along the motorway if you fancy sitting in that traffic.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now I've got Eugene online and to be followed by David.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. A good presentation, and I'm reasonably comfortable with where things are going, so happy with that. Just probably touching on the northern part of the district, heading into Pukekohe or Drury, and that we just need to always keep a good lens on that area, because we're also crossing over into AT network, so we need to make sure our alignment's really good there, and also are they helping fund or support some of these bus services, because we are taking people into their working environment, into the working spaces, but also there's AT Network have finished a contract, which is a service out to Port Waikato, which was only a once a week service. But Waikato District Council have picked that up and running with that for a while. And I've got to say that we've been having a really good relationship with the regional staff on some solutions there. But, there's a whole lot of growth in that north, massive amount of growth. So we need to make sure that we're pretty nimble in our thinking around that space. Moving forward. And just another, so that was mainly comments, but just a question. In the new regional funding model, is there budget in there for trial services?
So through the chair, trial services for me are a bit of a challenge. So one of the things we've tried to get away from through these public transport service plans is just having a whole list of trial services put into the RLTP, and then NZTA turn around and say, well, we don't really understand what these are doing. These are just wish lists. So we've actually tried to use the public transport service plans to look at what we can do to maximise demand in the corridors that support it the most. And trial services, whilst they can work, they need at least 2 years and ideally 5 before you build up that level of demand. You know, there have been people who've said we'll have a trial for 6 months. Quite frankly, that's a waste of time. It needs to be a certain level. So I wouldn't rule out trial services, because at the end of the day, if you do something and it's clearly not working, then you can't keep chucking money at it. But what I'd ideally like to do is to use the public transport service plans to get it right first time and not have to try and experiment too much. But look, we're always flexible and we always need to be nimble, as we've said. And back to your very good point about servicing the south of Auckland, one thing that I didn't mention that perhaps I should have done is that all of this does depend also what happens with Te Huia and the long-term aspirations to have stations at Tuakau and Pokeno at the very least, and to improve the frequency of that service further than currently. So we're looking at options for that, or starting to look at options for that at the moment. And of course, if we do have more frequent Te Huia services, that might change the model then that we look at for the services in the North Waikato. Now, that's all at the moment speculation because we don't have any firm plans, but you're absolutely right. We've got to be flexible and look at how things are changing all the time. And as you rightly say, work with AT very closely on joint funding arrangements and ensuring those benefits are reflected in the costs that various councils are paying. So great point, and thanks for that.
Thank you.
David.
Yeah, kia ora. I was wondering, I just wanted to make sure that staff were aware that there was a private bus running between Huntly and TK for secondary school pickup and drop off.
Through the chair, I personally wasn't aware of that, but I suspect there are many people in WRC with much more knowledge that are aware of it. I think with any private service, the key challenge we have is that it's not available for anyone else. You know, back to the point earlier about Ministry of Education, you know, they have buses running all over the district, but they're not available for people other than school children. Now, it's not part of this process to get into debate about whether that's right or wrong, but I think we need to be very mindful about the level of demand we can service for schools versus MOE and versus private. But if we can service it, particularly in places like Matamata and Raglan, which we do, then it's a very good way of making the best use of those buses and services.
Okay, because I mean, obviously the parents who pay the full economic price of sending their kids on that bus would be very keen to have public transport so they don't pay so much for that. But then the counter is the rest of the public gaining any benefit from that, and would they be interested in subsidising those parents, which would be an interesting debate to have. Obviously not now. And I'm not entirely sure if there's much demand for people to go from Huntly to TK for work or for services that aren't provided in Huntly. Not sure about the other way around. TK is smaller than Huntly, so there are services in Huntly that are not in TK. But yeah, that'd just be interesting to see how that plays out and where the data goes on that.
Yes, and through the chair, that's a really good point. And I think we're particularly interested to get feedback from people in both TK and Huntly about whether that service could and should be improved, because at the moment it's not very frequent and there may be a reason for that. But it is something that we're keen to understand further. So thank you.
Okay, there are no other questions or comments in terms of the regional connections proposition. So it's probably time that we close off this and we'll move to the final matter in terms of on the agenda, and that's the input in terms of the future of PT subcommittee, etc. However, just in closing, I think it'd be fair to summarise in terms of the comments around the table and input. There's a level of comfort in the direction that both the Hamilton and the regional connections propositions are heading in. And that those discussions that have occurred between WRC and the TLAs have obviously been positive and productive in terms of where things are at. And on behalf of those around the table, a desire that that level of engagement and discussion carry on as the detail gets further developed. And this is probably a comment more for the various partner staff. Whilst there has been that broad support, there have been a number of matters that people around the table today have proposed for some further thinking, some work and teasing out on. It will be important that those things just don't disappear into the ether and members can actually see ultimately what happens to those suggestions. And there may be reasons for some to progress, there may be good reasons for some matters not to progress, but it's really ensuring that that feedback loop occurs so members can actually see what's happened to the various suggestions. Brian, anything you'd like to add in conclusion?
I just want to say I like what you just said there in terms of that connection back to elected members. I think that's an important element, and we'll take that on board and make sure that happens.
Thank you. So thanks everyone. Thanks for Bridget and James in terms of the presentations and your very able responses to the comments and questions that were posed. So we'll now move to the final matter on the workshop agenda, and that's in terms of the feedback and certainly in terms of the survey feedback and what happens next in terms of the PT subcommittee. So Phil, are you presenting on this?
I'm going to start, and at some point the technology will fail me, and Brian will take over. So hopefully it'll be seamless for you.
And noting you have to disappear at 2:30.
Yes, I'm now making my way across Wellington. So
okay. Over to you.
Thank you. So there's a simple presentation attached there that you can see. If we go to the next slide. I've summarised the discussion that we had at the last committee into some themes which are attached in full to the pack that you received ahead of the meeting. The core themes are around the membership and consistency of attendance, the different committees, and the fact that the business of the committee is focused on two core discussion is allocated.
You're fading in and out, Phil. I think
I should be back on now. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Keep going.
So if you go to the next slide, you can see a summary of the feedback that we received from the March survey, which came out to you after the committee meeting. Again, that's included in full in your pack, in all of the answers to all of the questions from the respondents. That showed a broader perspective, very mixed in some areas, but again, some themes and opportunities. Again, around role clarity between committees, acknowledging the that strategic versus tactical mind, how we manage the difference between those things. even though there was a lot of work done within the long-term plan process, we still haven't achieved that vision of integrated delivery. Lots of discussion about whether there are too many meetings or not enough meetings, whether there need to be more workshops. So there's the perspective there, and the chair role that we have in place is aligned to the future-proof structure, but is different from the council structure. So suggestions in there about whether there should be a council or as the chair were included. So that's where we're at. We go to the next slide. I've made a series of suggestions really about potential options for the committee to consider. And where you would like this to go would be the content for the report that will come to the September meeting or the August meeting. In terms of the Transport Committee, that's a statutory process. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep. Keep talking.
That's a committee that we have to have. Our vision is that committee is focused on the delivery, development and delivery of the regional land transport plan and the monitoring of the KPIs. So we'd like that committee to have a strategic focus. Next slide. Then in terms of the future-proof public transport subcommittee, there are really two suggestions for your consideration. The first is that the MSP aspects of our current terms of reference relate to future-proof, and future-proof has been through a review process over the last triennium. Potentially the MSP business would fit well into a reporting process through to FPIC, either directly or via a subcommittee. And then in terms of, next slide please, the business on the tactical public transport delivery, we have the work to develop and deliver the regional public transport plan. Sorry, on the next slide, would potentially fit well into a regional PT subcommittee, which could report to regional transport committee, and would enable there to be conversations about bus network planning, responding to private share topics, the fares reviews, the delivery of these contracts that we've been talking about, and so on. There are a couple of options for that. One is potentially that subcommittee is formed as a single entity, and all business is mixed. Now the summary, the survey feedback indicated focus on Hamilton versus the rest is the key topic in that space, and how do we create an agenda that's of interest and enables all of the councillors across the region to have the level of input and contribution that they want. The alternative is to have one committee that stagger the agenda so that we deal with regional strategic matters first, and then we talk about potentially regional bus routes, and then we talk about Hamilton bus routes, and that would allow enough time to be allocated for each to achieve all of the things that people might want to cover in those discussions. So that's a summary of where we've got to. Happy to talk about some of that or all of that, whatever you wish to.
Okay, thanks, Phil. So I'll open it up for questions or comments around the table. Probably just one observation I'd make, that, and picking up through what you've outlined, Phil, is that challenge of having the strategic growth stuff and then the tactical detailed PT delivery. Because more often than not, the operational often overwhelms the strategic growth discussion. So what's proposed potentially as an option is to separate that out. Having said that, I'll open it up for discussion. Angela Rees.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I note in some of the feedback as well, there was talk about making more use of workshops such as we are now to allow that level of detail and drilling down into the weeds that people love to do, and maybe in a more informal text as well. So would you sort of see that fitting, or feedback from around the table? Would that be something that we would look at for next training alongside those subcommittee structures?
I think that's a really good idea, and that might allow more of that informal, detailed discussion than we've been able to have. I think, though, that from the growth side, there's been an aspiration for a lot more conversation than we've been able to provide space for. So I think if the strategic and the technical are still combined, I think we'll still have a lack of time for us to have workshops, certainly on the days of the meetings. So it's been a challenge. If you split them, then potentially there's space to have lots more workshops because they're on different mandates. But good idea.
Jennifer.
Thanks. Yeah, what you've proposed there so far, Phil, makes a lot of sense based on what you've summarised. I think the other part to ideally get right next traineum is, and maybe we even write it into the traineal agreement, but it's the WRC and TA relationship routines, exchanging of information. So there's plenty of lead time so that for these joint committees, the representative or two have had that time to allow their council to cover off things with them so that they have a mandate when they turn up in the room to a joint committee, as well as for that as a routine system for that rep reporting back to their full council, and that happening with all the TAs that are involved. But that would be already a massive leap forward should we go with what you've proposed. And to me, that's a really good assessment if things stay fairly the same. I'm just going to throw in a new idea, which still has to be critiqued and so forth, but should we be far enough down the track in the new traineum as WRC with the spatial planning work that we've funded through the long-term plan, whether RTC could be built into a spatial planning type committee, so including its terms of reference in that wider picture, and then potentially having the future-proof segment and the non-future-proof area as a segment, as a subcommittee under that, and would still be able to do a lot of the things that you talk about there. Anyway, but it's just if we were to change things drastically, that's one way I think we could do it. But at the very least, if we get those twos and fros right for joint committees to work as they are intended, then that would be massive. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz.
Look, I was just going to just support Angela actually just in the informal workshop suggestion. What I found with the main future-proof group is that we had a number of new members this particular traineum, and it does help members, if there are new ones, to settle in a bit more quicker, get up to speed when you're in an informal environment. It can be quite daunting sitting around this room and around this table with these microphones. So I just, wanted to lend support to that suggestion that, and especially if there are a lot of new members potentially next traineum. So it does help better decision making, I think, when people are feeling a lot more comfortable. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other commentary or questions?
Going to
Angela O.
Look, I guess and I'm always perfectly honest and transparent anyway. It hasn't worked for me as much this term because I feel like I've lost oversight. I feel like I've lost, and I hate saying operational because that's staff, not governance, but operational oversight over the PT plan. I was quite involved in it at the beginning, and I think we touched lightly on it in this committee, but not enough for me to truly represent communities that I represent and have some direct influence. And I recall many little decisions and motions that we put forward It might just be a slight route change. We did quite a bit of response stuff for the disability community through that plan and through hearings. So it was more of I'm a tangible outcome person. So it was a lot more tangible for me. So I think this will deliver what I'm looking for. I think the RTC works really well because it does sit a little high level. So whether future-proof stuff is better in there, and then a subcommittee of that gets into the little nitty-gritty of operational stuff a bit more and gets those tangible response outcomes that the community expect from us. I don't know. Ultimately, of course, it's up to the new council in October. So I think that's, yeah, when I think about the years that I've sat around this table, I sort of reflect back on, I felt able to be more responsive to the community in the past. And I do know that when we had the conversation last term, there's always that danger of sort of an operational governance type committee getting too much in the weeds, and I hate getting into the weeds myself. I do everything to avoid it, but I think that there's a healthy mid-balance. I feel like we've gone a little bit too high level. We've just lost the fingers into the community response, which is why we're all here to represent our people and our communities. Probably nothing anybody didn't already know, but.
No, thank you. Adrian.
It's just reflecting on what it is from us as members can do from this, from a district council, like from my council perspective, is sharing actually more information between staff and councillors around what's happening, so that all councillors get their eyes over it, and it's not just the one or two that are representing here. That's probably the greatest risk, because obviously we're in a fairly new space. We are a little bit different from the other future-proof members because Morrinsville's been going for a long time. There's some tweaks being done with Te Araha and Paira. Matamata's still in that trial phase, but it's just, I think it's the communication and the risk of it sitting with a handful of people instead of actually the whole of council. So yeah, I can't get my head around the Regional Transport Committee and future-proof as to how we work through this, because obviously today we had the Thames Coromandel Hauraki included in this brief. Did it need to be? I don't know, because it wasn't pertinent to this future-proof. That would be the only question I'd raise, is now we know something, do they don't know? I'm just challenged by that it perhaps needed, should have been geared to just the future-proof committee, but I don't know. There's no silver bullet solution here, other than the fact that it's probably beholden to us to do a better job getting the information back to our councils, potentially. Yep.
Okay, and there will also, because this subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Future-Proof Implementation Committee, so there needs to be a discussion around around that grouping, notwithstanding there are a number of the same faces around that. But what I'm taking from the comments this afternoon, that, and please respond if you don't agree, but what I'm taking from it, there seems to be support in terms of what Phil has outlined in terms of probably having two arrangements. One is in terms of that strategic growth focus around the future-proof table or whatever, and then in terms of the PT being part of or a subset of the regional public transport or the regional public transport plan and subcommittee. So I just wanted to summarise that, so that provides some direction for Phil and the team to do some further work and thinking on the next, what that may look like, because this is very much high level. What will that look like on the ground, both in terms of the regional council structures, but also in terms of the future-proof arrangements. Jennifer, then Angela.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think based on what is presented as well as the feedback now can get wrapped up into a guidance advisory paper that goes both to the regional council as well as to the TAs involved.
And also to the future-proof
as well.
Partnership.
Yes, but actually the RTC parts also to the other
Yes,
TAs
yep.
involved. And we have a little bit of time, but it all can be wrapped up in obviously with the regional PT rating piece that's going to change our world quite a bit, no matter which way it lands. And therefore giving the councillors this training, hopefully a little bit of an idea of what to keep in mind over the turn, as well as being ready to advise the next lot. Thank you.
Angela.
Yeah, and just to follow on from that, I am mindful that whoever the members are on those committees, especially for RTC, then that they do realise that there will be quite a high PT focus moving through that subcommittee, because you want the membership to be consistent and turn up. So.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think there's sufficient direction. I think, Phil, you've probably gone by now.
I can just about hear you. It's been very useful. Thank you. It does give us.
You've got enough guidance in terms of the next phase?
Yes, I have. And the timeframes that you've set out there in terms of reports through the very last round of the triennium through to all of those committees is certainly achievable. So we'll start work on that now.
Yep. No, thanks very much. Thanks very much to you and the team for the work you've done on this. And as someone just mentioned before, these are only recommendations because it's up to the new councils agreeing or whatever to what the arrangements will be. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for those around the table, those who have come in online, and for the staff who have attended, presented, and been available today. So thank you. I was looking. Oh, Dave's coming to do the closing karakia, given he did. Okay. Yep. Excellent, Brooke.
Unahia mai te uru tapanui. Ke wātia, ke mama, te nākau, te tinana, te heninaro, e te ara takatū, koia rā e ronga, e whakaaria ake ke ronga, ke tina, haumie hue, taike.
Thank you. Workshop closed.